Truly an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guests. We're joined right now by Charlie Robinson and the legendary Freeway Ricky Ross, not to be confused with the rap star. Charlie, Ricky, how you guys doing?
Great, Jason. How are you?
I'm good.
It's good to have you both on the
Trying to
show.
stay dry.
Is it raining there in LA, Rick?
Yes. And you know they said never rains in California.
It's very rare. I used to live in LA. Now, Rick, I was reading online that you got this name Freeway simply because you had an apartment off the 101 or something like that. Is that correct?
The 110.
The 110. Sorry. I thought it had something to do with, running cocaine on freeways or something like that. People are going to know about you because of your involvement in the past. You've totally reformed yourself, but you are a former billion-dollar CIA-connected cocaine kingpin. Isn't that right?
And something like that.
Can you fill people in perhaps
I never heard
for...
like that before, but
Sorry,
I
Rick,
never
what was
heard
that?
it like that before. But I said I never heard it like that before, but I guess you're close.
Well, give us the full story, Rick, maybe for people who don't remember or haven't heard about you before.
Well, I didn't know I was working with the CIA. It was I guess by default.
Yep.
My connection was a Nicaraguan operative, and they were fighting a war over in Nicaragua, and the CIA was backing them. And anyway, they lost the war, and they had to flee the country, and they came over here, and Congress had cut off money to them and said that the CIA couldn't give them money anymore. And Ronald Reagan and George Bush wasn't ready to end that war. So
Right.
They came up with a scheme to raise money, and it was through cocaine.
Yeah. And it's interesting, Rick, because when Charlie and I talk to people about this Iran-Contra affair, it's just astounding how few people remember or are even aware what it is. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, well, you're talking about it's almost, 20 years old, 25 years old almost.
Maybe more.
Pretty old,
Yeah.
and we don't really keep up with history anymore, and people's attention span right now is so short, and we got so much other stuff that's going on right now that's so much more important, stuff like this coronavirus that's going on, and, people's lives are full of their own problems and their own trumpet to know, what the government's doing.
Right.
I mean, they'll vote for anybody.
That's true. I think Charlie would agree that basically they want this type of stuff to occupy people's attention so that they don't remember things like Iran-Contra. Don't you think that's true, Charlie?
Of course, yeah. They get us bogged down in all the things that don't really matter all that much, while they're running around the back looting the place or running cocaine or starting indiscriminate wars all over the place. But they want us to be distracted with, whether or not Jennifer Lopez was actually giving an X-rated pole dance at the Super Bowl. We can discuss that all day long. But the minute you want to talk about something real, like, hey, why did that plane crash with 2 tons of cocaine on it? Why was it registered to the CIA? They don't want to talk about that.
Absolutely not. Somebody might be talking about indicting somebody.
Yep.
And they're the only ones that can indict, so they wind up getting away with whatever they want to get away with anyway.
Yeah.
So most people say, why care?
Having a little microphone problem here. Hang on a second, fellas. Wow, we're in the space age or something. Can you guys hear me all right? Oh my goodness.
No, you sound muffled or something.
You sound like you're in LA underwater, Jason. All the rain.
Difficulty there. Oh boy, I don't know what's going on. Sorry, fellas, bear with me. So, Charlie, you met Rick at Acapulco. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I was at Acapulco I was one of the speakers. I got a chance to listen to Rick do his presentation as well. I chatted with him a little bit afterwards. I gave him my book at the airport. We talked for a couple minutes there as well. I got to tell you, if you ever have a chance to see Freeway Rick Ross do a public speaking engagement, you need to check it out because his talk was so inspiring, and I didn't really know what to expect. I knew who he was, I knew the background, but the positive message that came out of that and the ability to connect with that audience, and I'll tell you, I was in that audience. Everybody was hanging on his every word. It was really important. It was fascinating. I mean, of course, we don't wish to have gone through what Rick went through, but to hear that story of someone that went in, came out the other side of the Justice Department, and then has had the success that Rick has had and has been able to get on the stage and speak to people it's very inspiring. And I got to say, Rick, one of the things that I was most impressed with was your positive attitude, the way you absolutely connected with the crowd and people that might have had some apprehension about, I don't know what we're going to hear here with a cocaine trafficker is going to come in here and talk to us about things. That went out the window after about 5 minutes. And everyone that was there to hear what you had to say left that presentation with a very different view of you. And I felt like people were ready to run through brick walls. It was very inspiring and motivating.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you, because I never looked at myself as a motivational speaker, and if somebody would have told me that I would be doing this, 15, 20 years ago, I'd have been like, shut your mouth. Yeah. So to be able to do that now, but that only came from me learning and studying, because what I found out is if you're not studying, if you're not learning, then you can't tell other people what's going on. Otherwise, you'll just be talking mumble jumble. So a lot of that comes from me doing my homework while I was in prison, finding myself, finding out my direction that I thought I should be going in, and how I could be a contributor to society instead of somebody that's taken from society. So often, everybody wants the world to give them, and they're not looking for ways to give back to the world. And I decided that one of the things that I think would be one of the greatest things that I've ever done would be to give back to the world.
It must have been quite an experience for you in prison, Rick, because you were originally given a life sentence, isn't that correct?
Yes, I had a life sentence without the possibility of parole. And it was definitely days that I felt that I would never go home. And that's really how my book came about. One of the things I found out about prison, one of the worst things about prison, and it's really something that society should be trying to erase about prison, is that your helplessness, your inability to do anything for anybody. You become worthless when you're in prison. And I think that instead of breaking people down to worthlessness, we should be trying to build them up to greatness. And when I was in prison, that's what I thought. I decided that I wanted to do it myself. I found out that I could mold me, that I could shape me into being not the person that I wanted to be, because I never knew what it was that I wanted to be. You are you're running through life and you don't have a clue about nothing. It's like your emptiness. You're it's like a bottle that has no substance. And when you're running through life like that, you can become a drug dealer. You can be the person who would sell drugs to their own loved ones, to take advantage of other people's weaknesses. But once you become confident inside of yourself and know that you're great and that your life matters just as much as anybody else's life, it's hard to become a drug addict, a robber, or any of the other things that we have so rampant in this country, is because of people feeling the emptiness, the loneliness, the worthlessness. And once we fix those problems, I think a lot of our other problems would disappear.
It's really well said, Rick, and congratulations on turning yourself around. I think it's a situation that very few people could kind of pull themselves up out of. You know, for the image on our show today, I've taken a picture of you and I've posted you there with a couple of Polaroids of some of the other people that were involved in Iran-Contra. And although two of them went on to become president of the United States, pretty much all the rest of them are either dead or went to jail, which of course you did, but you got out of it. And it sounds like you've done an amazing job of turning your life around. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. I think I did. One of my goals is to have the greatest comeback story of all time. You know, I went from being totally illiterate to, before I left prison, I had read over 300 books.
Wow.
And not counting newspapers and magazines. So I did a total 360, I believe, while I was in prison. And I want to continue to build on that for the rest of my life.
That's great. And was there a moment, was there an incident, you're in prison, what happens that takes you from being illiterate to then reading 300 books and actually co-authoring your own untold autobiography, Freeway Rick Ross, The Untold Autobiography?
And yes, I also had the 21 Keys to Success. Well, I had lost my appeal, and my lawyer told me that there was nothing that could be done for my case, that I was going to be spending the rest of my life in prison. Well,
Wow.
Some other guys told me that I should not be counting on my lawyer to win my case for me. They said something along these lines. I probably won't get it absolutely correct, but it went something like this here. Your lawyer has a wife, kids, and other clients. Do you think that he's putting all of his energy into you? And if somebody else wants for you more than you wanted for yourself, then you're in trouble. So what I took from that is that they meant that if my lawyer wanted me out of prison better than I wanted to be out of prison, then I was in trouble. And from that, I took that my lawyer or nobody else should know more about my case than I did.
Wow.
So I went from there. To use the library, you had to learn how to read, and I started my reading from there.
So how did you learn how to read? Just open up a book and start reading? I mean, I don't even remember how I learned how to read. I guess it was kindergarten or first grade.
No, my cellie made me what they call cue cards, and it's with your ABCs on them, and you just start sounding them out and learn how to put the sounds together. And you know, in a couple weeks, I was reading the newspaper, and I went from reading the newspaper to reading law books.
That is really amazing, Rick. You know, I didn't know any of this about you. So your cellmate was helping you to sort of lift yourself up. I think a lot of people, and I'm including myself in this, have this vision that you go into a prison and you're just immediately going to be killed. You're going to be beaten up, robbed, raped, whatever. How did you avoid, it sounds like you had a pretty inspirational and uplifting time in prison.
Well, prison can be dangerous at the same time. You know, they have a sense of bullies in prison, just like they have bullies on the street, and they prey on people who they feel are weak. But for me, I wasn't in that position. As a matter of fact, I was able to help guys that were getting bullied because I didn't think it was fair. Because you know, some young guy come in or some disadvantaged guy come in and other guys take advantage of him. I have a couple stories about that kind of stuff as well. We'll say that for a later day. But
Sure.
yes, prison was uplifting for me. It gave me an opportunity to really get to know who I was because I had started to identify cocaine as my inspiration. You know, anytime something was wrong, all I had to do was go out and sell a little cocaine, and it would make the situation better, where I could literally forget about what my problems was.
Hmm.
And it's almost like a dope thing. You know, whenever something goes wrong for a drug addict, what they do is they go and get high. Well, that was almost the same thing with me. If something wasn't going right, I could go out and sell a few 100 kilos of cocaine, and I would feel better about myself. But what
Wow.
it did is, when I was selling the cocaine, it gave me all of these different feelings. You know, the rush of getting away, the fear of getting caught, and I learned that my body started craving those type of feelings all the time.
Well, to be clear, Rick, you weren't a cocaine user, right? You're just saying the rush of being essentially a criminal, actually a criminal, selling this dangerous product in a dangerous world. It was like a real adrenaline boost. Or were you using drugs as well?
No, I wasn't using. I only used for a few days. I stopped really quick. I noticed that the using part wasn't what I was after. I was after the money. I grew up very poor. My mom was on welfare. Uh, I don't know if you had a chance. Did you get a chance to see my documentary?
I've seen a lot of things about you in the past, but I wanted to come into this cold and ask you these type of questions because I think these are the kind of questions that people who maybe aren't familiar with you would have. And as you said at the beginning of the conversation, people forget about this stuff. So I hope that we can kind of remind them about it.
Okay. All right. Well, I had a documentary that was on Netflix. I dreamed that up while I was in prison, and I thought that it was important to let people see it because it would explain more about what I felt is that I could be an expert on drugs and cocaine in particular, the habits of drug addicts, because I was around them. When I sold drugs, I wasn't one of those people who sold drugs and stayed in Beverly Hills. You know, I stayed right in the dens where all the people were getting high at, where they hung out at, and I was able to learn uh, from them.
And so this is the documentary Freeway, Crack in the System, is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
So the other thing that a lot of people forget, and I mean, I got to tell you this, a lot of white people that I know think that this was some kind of conspiracy theory rumor kind of thing, but most black people that I know are aware that the CIA flooded black neighborhoods with cocaine, and this is basically, this was your supply line, isn't that right?
That's right. Absolutely.
And I realize it's a sensitive topic. Are you able to share any details about that with the audience?
Well, I didn't know much about the CIA stuff until I was going to trial. Same person that I used to get my drugs from also was my informant with the DEA. So when he testified about where he was getting his drugs from, fishing trips that his boss had been on, this is when we started to learn all of this information. I didn't know any of this before. When you're growing up in South Central and in the ghettos and selling drugs, uh, we don't dig deep into people's background, where they from, what they did before they start selling drugs. What we mainly concerned about, will we be able to keep getting our drugs at a great price, and how much can you bring?
Right. So, and what's the process? This guy shows up in the neighborhood one day. I mean, I guess it's pretty easy for the CIA to figure out where in South Central LA or other neighborhoods drugs are being sold. You just walk around, canvass the neighborhood, and say, hey, where's the crack?
Yeah, that's definitely one way to do it. With my situation, though, my situation was more. Um, I played tennis with a skill center teacher, and me and him had got to be really tight. And one day I disappeared for a few months, and when I came back, he asked me where I'd been. And, you know, I wasn't the kind of person that would lie to somebody that I cared about, so I told him what I've been doing. And that's when he sprung it on me that he used to be a cocaine dealer and, you know, and yada, 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 yada from there. Well, after me and him hooked up, he wound up introducing me to another guy who was a jeweler, and then the jeweler, he's the one that hooked me up with my first Nicaraguan connection.
So conceivably, and you might not have even known about this, if these guys are these CIA guys are looking for a person like yourself, a Freeway Ricky Ross, to move all this stuff, they basically, what do you think their intent was, Rick? They needed somebody to flood the neighborhood with this stuff, and they were going to just use you up, crush you, and throw you away, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what wound up happening. I don't know if that was their intention in the beginning. We know the intention was to raise money for this war. They felt it was very, very important for Russia not to win Nicaragua through the Sandinistas, and that they were willing to do anything to make sure that that wasn't going to happen.
Mm-hmm. And so after you educated yourself in prison and were able to read and stuff, did you dig into the facts and history of the Iran-Contra scandal, Barry Seal and all that stuff?
I did. I did a lot of extensive research on CIA, other cases where they had sold drugs, and so forth.
Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, when you found out about Barry Seal, how did it make you feel that you did not, you know, end up the way that he did? Obviously, you must have been shocked to hear about all this stuff going on.
Well, I was, and in some ways afraid what could happen.
Right.
I was in prison though at the time, so I had a lot of protection from the guards. Hey, you know, the guard's job in prison is to make sure that enough while you're there in their custody. Mm-hmm. So I was in prison, and I just didn't have the same type of fear. When Gary Webb committed suicide or killed himself, the head twice, it started to come back though. Mm-hmm.
And are you're saying that he killed himself, or do you actually believe that he killed himself? There's a lot of people that think he was killed.
I don't know. He was shot in the head twice. I know there's doctors that say it's possible, but I think it's a little hard.
Right.
For somebody to shoot in the head twice. But, you know, they had a coroner who said it was possible.
Yeah, they always seem to be able to find those coroners who figure out ways that people can do all kinds of amazing things, don't they, Charlie? You guys had an opportunity to get to know each other a little bit in Mexico at Anarchapulco. What kind of interesting stories came out of that, Charlie?
Well, one of the things I wanted to jump back on really fast is that when Rick was talking about his lawyer not caring about his case as much as he did, it reminds me of this problem that we have in our justice system with public defense attorneys. And in some of the major cities around the country, they call it the American Pie defense attorney, because the average public defense attorney has the equivalent of the amount of time it takes to play the song American Pie, which is a little over 7 minutes, to get ready for each case that they have to handle. Now think about that. Somebody that is facing probation all the way up to a life without the possibility of parole puts their life in the hands of a public defense attorney that has on average 7 minutes to prepare for their case. And we wonder why everybody gets plead down to as you know, they stack the charges on you, you're looking at 25 years, which of course sounds like an eternity. And then all of a sudden, once you get into that plea bargain scenario, which you have to do because you're a defense attorney that doesn't know, has not prepared for the case, all of a sudden they knock it down to maybe 4 years. And although that doesn't sound good, it sounds a whole lot better than 25 years. So I think we've got a justice system. I think it's an understatement to say this, but we have a justice system that is obviously broken. And criminals or people that are brought on trial that have to put their life in the hands of public defense attorneys are going to end up in prison. I'm not sure what the percentage is. I think it's something like 93% of all cases are plea bargained, which means they don't even wind up in front of a jury. You've got people that are, the odds are stacked against them. And then you take that and add on top of that the concept of a private prison industry, which is unbelievably damaging. And then we start to incentivize companies that are publicly traded on Wall Street to keep their occupancy rates as high as possible. And that means keeping a fresh batch of convicted felons coming in. And so this justice system has been so broken because of this. And you get a lot of guys that may or may not be guilty finding themselves in the system. And of course, then you tack on that the parole system, which is totally broken, which is a feeder mechanism back into the prison system. After they get out, they're only out on average for about 6 months before they go right back in. And what we wind up with is a justice system that is just us, the just us system, and it needs to be reformed.
Yeah. So Rick, how do you feel when you see people like Jeffrey Epstein, let's say, who is raping children and doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and he got like 1.5 years in jail, obviously before this recent incident where he killed himself, allegedly. What do you think about that? I mean, you were there, life sentence. How do you feel about people like Jeffrey Epstein?
Well, I look at the war on drugs, was very hypocritical. They wanted drugs to be the problem of the country, and they wanted young black men to be the problem for the drug war. So I know that we can't incarcerate our way out of this drug war. We can't just go around locking everybody up. The last time I read the Round report, and it had that there were over 53 million Americans that had tried drugs. So when you look at the numbers are ecstatic about how many people are involved and how many people lock them up. You would be locking up. They think we the world prisoners now. Just thinking we have to lock up 53 million people. We will be running at the scene. So It's very important that we connect with some positive movements and find ways to bring the people from up under the underground and bring them up top and let them know that we are cool with them, that we understand where they're coming from.
And this is basically what you've dedicated your post-prison life to doing. As Charlie pointed out, you've become kind of a motivational speaker. What other kind of work do you get into? Are you going to prisons and speaking to people, or students at schools, telling young kids about your experience?
Well, it's amazing that it's hard for me to get inside of prison.
Wow. So when you were in there, you couldn't get out. And now that you're out, they won't let you get in.
Exactly. I think that I could do wonders with our prison system, because we spend a lot of money on housing people in prison. Lots and lots and lots of money.
Right.
I'm talking about enough money that most of the people in prison, if they gave a check for 1% of that money, none of those guys will go back to prison.
They just have a salary. Wow. See, that's interesting insight. There's been a lot of talk during the Trump presidency about criminal justice reform. What do you think about that? Has President Trump been taking any steps that you think are beneficial?
Well, we definitely could use prison reform. Like I said, we could take those prisons and turn them into universities, which is what they should be used for. That's what when the ancestors first started the prison industry. They built prisons so that people could go and get a time out and get themselves back together and then come and make a free society again.
I mean, the ironic thing is that what you're saying is, first of all, not that complicated, and also it makes total sense. I mean, if prison is, as I imagine it, just this hellish place where you're beaten and your teeth are busted out and you're raped and forced to go on drugs and fight people, it sounds like you're never going to rehabilitate anybody in there. But in your case, where you learned to read and you learned about the law, really improve yourself, it might inspire you to want to get out of prison. I mean, that's really what we want the thing to be, something to reform people and, like you have, rebuild your life. I think they really need to be looking at people like you who have had a success story coming out of prison.
Absolutely. And we need more people to be working to get that light to come on in people's heads. Because until that light comes on, you're not going to change. You're going to stay the same.
Yeah.
And if we took the time out and really started to give people that light switch so they could turn the light on when it's necessary, I believe that we could go so much further.
Absolutely. And we should remind people who are watching us right now, Rick, they can follow you on Instagram, and that's a good way to stay in touch. You've also got a website called freewayrickyross.com that people can link to from the Instagram account. And that's a good way for people to keep up with you. I also want to let everybody know, Rick, that Charlie has started a podcast called the Macroaggressions Podcast with Charlie Robinson. Charlie, what's the podcast all about?
Well, it's a combination of some of the topics that I tackle in my first book, combined with interviews, video interviews. It's going to be the video interview component is hosted on David Icke's new Iconic video platform, and then the audio only version is available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It just went up 2 days ago. The first 5 episodes are up and ready to go. And I encourage people to check it out and subscribe and take a look. Oh, and by the way, if you go to Freeway Rick Ross's website and you want one of those cool sweatshirts, good luck. They're totally sold out. I'm still trying to get one. He had one on at Acapulco. Everybody wanted it, and he said, "You're never going to get one of these, man. They're sold out." So
wow.
It's got good merchandise.
Are they being manufactured in Wuhan, China, Rick? Maybe there's a little holdup with the virus.
No, we're making them in America. We're trying to put Americans back to work.
Nice.
I think it's very important that we start. We used to make the best product in the world.
Yeah.
And only because we started shipping all of our work overseas that other people started to outdo us. You know, in '59, you know, they say Chevrolet perfected the car, and since then, you know, there's been so many other countries that has come in and have taken over that market. Well, it's time for us to pick out some markets and we become the big dog on the block again.
We've got a lot of questions coming in from the comments, and I have a feeling from what you're telling us that this was a highly compartmentalized operation where you didn't deal with too many people at the top levels or even probably beyond your direct contacts. I got to imagine in the illicit business of selling drugs, just as in the business of clandestine operations with the CIA, you don't want to talk to a lot of people about it. You want to keep your connections tight and small and close to people that you know.
Absolutely. That's the way that you prefer to do it. You figure the less people you know, the safer it is, and the better you know the people that you do deal with, the better it is. But in the drug business, there's just no safe way to go about it. Selling drugs is for dope. And I know that now. But, you know, when you're young, nobody turned the light switch on in your head. You're still walking around in the darkness. then, you basically say, Lord, forgive me, for I know not what I do.
Have you become religious since this experience?
No, I'm not religious.
Got it.
I just use that phrase. That so many other people are.
Right, of course. And you're obviously a great communicator. People are asking us questions like, did you ever meet Oliver North? I cannot possibly imagine that would have happened.
No, I didn't know. I didn't know that I was involved. I mean, even when Gary Ware printed it and it came out, I was in San Diego at the time, and it came out in the San Diego Tribune. I laughed at the article, and I said how silly these people could be.
You thought it was a conspiracy theory?
Yes.
Uh-huh. And so would you say, since this all happened to you, I mean, how's your outlook of the world with regard to trusting the government and conspiracy theories? I mean, what do you think about 9/11 or this Wuhan virus, the coronavirus? Do you think these things are true and accurate to the way that we're told, or is it another manipulation in the exact same way your situation was?
Well, definitely some has been manipulated, some hasn't. Right now with this corona epidemic, all I can say is that it's amazing, and we're going to have to do some drastic things to correct the things that already happened. I don't know if you know, but the NBA, Major League Baseball, and soccer today.
It's really going to have wide-reaching economic impact. Charlie, what do you think about this Wuhan virus? You and I haven't spoken about it too much.
Well, here's the thing about whether it's the CIA trafficking cocaine or 9/11 or the Wuhan virus or whatever. We're getting our information from the American government and the American media. And these are two institutions that have a long track record of lying to us about a variety of things. They are the boys who cried wolf. And so when a new crisis comes along, forgive me if I'm not just willing to run right out and do exactly what the CDC or the government or the media tells me to do. It may be a legitimate issue that is a very big deal. The problem is that after years and years and years of being lied to by these organizations, I just can't take them at their word. I just cannot. Now, does that mean be reckless and, and go out and cough on everybody and shake everybody's hands? No, obviously not. But am I going to leap up and fall in line and do exactly what they say and take the vaccination and, all and not travel and not do all that stuff? No, I'm not going to do that because they just don't have the credibility that I need in order to believe something like this. I wish I did, and there was a time when I believed it, but after years of this, I simply have to take a wait and see approach to it, only because I just have a problem with the source of the information.
I agree with you completely. And Rick, it seems like there's a vaccine coming for this Wuhan virus. They want everybody to take a vaccine for something. I was just looking at the news stories specifically about the vaccine, and only a few minutes ago there were 3 different stories about a vaccine being almost ready, and one of them was coming from the Pentagon.
That's not where I get my vaccines from.
Yeah, it seems like a strange...
I don't think I would take that vaccine.
I'm with you.
Either.
I'm with you on that. The Pentagon, it's not really a group that you can trust. Now, someone is saying here, Paige in the comments, Rick, is asking about somebody, and again, I apologize, I'm not as familiar with the details as I could be, but someone named Danilo Blando. Do you know that person?
Yeah, Danilo Blandon was the guy that I got my drugs from. He was also the Minister of Agriculture for Nicaragua.
Whoa.
And he was also my informant.
Wow. So this guy's the Minister of Agriculture for Nicaragua, and the drugs were coming from the Sandinistas, who were a
No,
militant.
The
The Contras,
drugs was
right?
coming from. They was coming from Colombia to the Contras. The Contras was
Contras.
bringing the drugs over on military planes.
Wow. So this was a vast operation. The Contras, right? The Contras were fighting the Sandinistas. The Sandinistas were a communist government, and Ronald Reagan was super anti-communist. Rick, do you have any insight or feelings as to, I always sort of had the feeling that Ronald Reagan was kind of like a benevolent dope who looked good in a suit and could make a lot of speeches, but he was really manipulated by George H.W. Bush and all of those sinister characters around him. Do you think Ronald Reagan was pivotal in Iran-Contra, or he didn't know what was going on like he claimed?
Oh no, he knew. He knew.
He knew.
I mean, even one day he said that he knew absolutely nothing about the gun sales, and then he came back a couple weeks later and said, "I lied."
Whoa, I don't remember that. That's amazing. I was a little kid when it was going on. So again, I think this is a thing that we really need to educate ourselves on a bit more, because like you said, we're all so prone to forget history, and I feel like that probably makes it, if not repeat itself, at least rhyme a little bit. And Bill Clinton was, of course, involved in this Iran-Contra affair. Did you ever have any inklings that stuff was going on at Mena Airport in Arkansas? Rick, you still there? Did we lose you?
Yeah. Hear me?
We got a weak signal.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, you're back. So did you ever have any indication that anything was going on in Mena, Arkansas, or that William Clinton, the governor of Arkansas, was involved in this operation?
I did. After I started doing my studies, I started to find newspaper articles and things like that talking about it. But it was at a different time, so I wasn't involved with any of the guys that were involved with the Clinton situation.
Yeah, and I mean, this makes total sense. Right.
Hey, that I know of. Let's say that I know of.
Exactly, because we have to assume that the way the CIA wants to recruit an operative is they get somebody like you, they tell you as little about the overall operation as possible, and just say, hey, Rick, you move the drugs. And you're getting money, you're getting drugs, you're not getting arrested. You don't really care about the rest of it. You're a young guy rolling around LA in the 80s. You had to be the king of Compton. What was that like?
I loved it. If you go from being on welfare to now you're controlling millions of dollars, you're able to help your family, your friends. It's addictive. Trust me.
Right. Well, you got homes, cars, women, whatever you want.
Whatever you want. You feel like a king. So once you're feeling like that, it becomes addicting as well. And I fell into that same pig hole. I guess that's what you would call it.
And looking back on that, Rick, doesn't it seem like, wealthy, fancy guys like George Bush and Bill Clinton and whoever coming into a really economically depressed city like Compton, somewhere in Los Angeles, wherever it might be, Baltimore, coming in there, targeting a person like yourself, someone who did grow up on welfare, who they see as on the street selling drugs. They come to you with basically exactly what you want, tons of money. It seems like a manipulation of you.
An opportunity to be something that you always wanted to be, no matter what your education level, your income level, everybody wants to be important. Everybody wants to have clout.
Right. And so when you would see, after you learned about this stuff, that Bill Clinton and, the presidents of the United States were involved. You're rotting in a stinky jail cell. It couldn't have been fun. What were your thoughts like when you would see these guys? We got a picture of them right here in tuxedos. They look happy, well-fed. They've had millions of dollars in private jets most of their lives. How does it make you feel to think about this?
I thought it was very, very unfair. I felt that if the government was involved in it, then why would it be illegal?
Right.
Doesn't that mean that that everybody can do it? That the government is doing it. Why not everybody do it? And that was my attitude. But before even the government, we found out that a lot of our entertainers was involved as well. So
right.
it really made me feel that I was doing the right thing.
Yeah. And aren't you fearful now, Rick? I mean, you're talking to us about things that Bill Clinton's still alive. Isn't there a possibility that they don't want you talking about this? Have you ever been threatened?
Well, no, I haven't been threatened. The guy that broke my story, Gary Webb, I don't know if you know, but he either killed himself or they killed him. He committed suicide. They say he committed suicide. It was wrong suicide. He was shot in the head twice, and they ruled it a suicide. But at the end of the day, if Gary felt enough to report a story that had absolutely nothing to do with him, nor his loved ones, but he still put his life on the line to do what he did. I mean, he wanted to be an investigative journalist, and that's exactly what he did. He investigated the things that, in his opinion, wasn't right.
Yeah.
So for me, I have to stand up for the things that I believe in, and if that means that I should die for it, then so be it. I was willing to die to sell cocaine. So.
Yeah, I mean, you had to know that was a major risk. I'm sure you've taken note of the remarkable number of people who've allegedly committed suicide while investigating really important things about stuff that the government has a totally different version of the story when compared to what actually happened. I don't know if you're aware of Philip Haney. He was a Department of Homeland Security whistleblower who was investigating a jihadi infiltration of American society, including people like Keith Ellison, who is now the Attorney General in Minnesota, Ilhan Omar, and certain radical Islamists who want to basically exercise jihad within the United States and take over our culture. Phil, initially it was reported, killed himself, although every person who knows him, including Texas Representative, the Republican Louis Gohmert, said that Phil personally told him he would never commit suicide. So I don't believe that Gary Webb committed suicide. I think he just had this story at a time when it was still sensitive and they didn't want it coming out. Charlie, what else do we want to ask Rick? I know you guys had some time together and you know a lot more about his backstory than I do.
Yeah, well, one of the things that happened with this cocaine trafficking in the 80s was it actually killed two birds with one stone, because it was the funding mechanism, as we know, for the CIA. It generated, all the money in the world that they needed. But then it also did something else that Richard Nixon put in place back in the 70s, and that was Richard Nixon knew he was going to lose the election because he had a problem. He wasn't going to get the black vote and he wasn't going to get the hippie vote. So what he did was he set out to push heroin and heavily criminalize heroin as a, quote, black drug, and do the same thing with marijuana because that was a hippie drug, and figured he could put a lot of those people in prison so they wouldn't have the ability to vote for him. Now, the same plan was run in the 80s with this as well. When you're pushing all the cocaine into the inner cities, you're obviously making the government is making a fortune on this. But then what they're also doing is they're also putting as many of the black community in prison or in the system as they could, and that took them out, gave them the inability to vote anymore, and it destroyed the inner city, which the government in their insane rationale thinks is a good thing for them because it keeps them in power and keeps people dependent on them. So it was really reprehensible what the government did. And it just kind of goes to show that they really can't be trusted because they have a mentality that is psychopathic, and they have no problem using people like Rick, and then discarding them and hiding, and then stacking the justice system to defend themselves and put everybody else in prison. And to have a living human being like Rick go up on stage in an Acapulco and talk about this and talk about how he came in one way, he came in as one person into the prison system and came out another way, as this inspirational character that has the ability to connect with everyone in that audience, regardless of their background, was such an it was an amazing moment. And I really just felt inspired when I walked out. Even after hearing a very sad and depressing story, it kind of gave me hope that if you think that it's over and a life sentence without the possibility of parole, let's be honest, man, that looks like it's over when you get that.
Right.
To not give up, to not just throw it all away and say, I'm illiterate and I'm never going to, what's the difference? What's the point? To come through and come out better than you went in. That's what it's supposed to be about. That's what the prison reform concept be about. But we miss that somewhere. We miss that. We're just warehousing and stacking and packing people and converting the gyms in Pelican Bay and putting triple bunk beds in there and putting human beings in there on long stretches for nonviolent offenses. I mean, everything about this whole system is broken. And you look to the government, you say, well, government, fix it. And then you realize they're the ones that created it. They have no incentive to fix it. They don't want it fixed. They want it broken. And so I feel so bad for people. Now, obviously, there are people in prison that have legitimate crimes, that they have done some bad things, and there's a percentage that need to be there. But man, there is a disproportionate number of people that are in that system for nonviolent offenses, and they're not contributing to society. They're draining it, and we need to change these things. And I think hearing Rick talk and saying, like, hey, this is a guy that bettered himself in prison. It can be done. It's an inspiration to people to look at this whole prison system and not discount these people and not pretend like they're throwaway human beings. They are not. There's still value there, and we can fix this system if we get enough people to realize it's broken.
Yeah. So, Rick, do you have any plans in the future to get involved in any kind of political activities around prison reform?
I already do. I work. I go into prisons whenever I can. It's crazy. They want to keep me in there for life, but now it's hard for me to get in there and speak to other inmates to explain to them how I did it. But every now and then I do. I'm also working with a few organizations. I don't know if you know or not, but I just received a marijuana license here in California, so now I can legally sell marijuana. I'll be opening a dispensary soon.
Nice.
And I also have my own brand. So I also try to say why we have 30 states in this country where marijuana is legal, and why are there people that are sitting in prison for selling marijuana? I think it's unfair. So I'm advocating to release the marijuana prisoners, and this was to start doing some prison reform. Let's take these people and because selling marijuana is a crime, an economic crime. It's not a crime of ill will or vicious malice. When you're trying to hurt somebody or anything like that. There, it's basically somebody trying to make some money, and I think that these people shouldn't be treated. They shouldn't be in there with murderers and rapists and child molesters and things of that nature. And a lot of times they put them all in the same cell, and um, is not how it should be done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in fact, what you're describing and the way that it works right now is a recipe for taking people who aren't criminals and turning them into hardened criminals, which is the opposite of what we want to do. The brand that Rick has launched is called LA Kingpins, and it's a legal cannabis company. I commend you on that, Rick. Certainly, if you told an audience that you owned a restaurant with a bar in it and you made a lot of money selling alcohol to people, I don't think anybody would judge that. But I agree with you that cannabis is something that can be used for medical purposes. A lot of people are using it for that, or recreational purposes. It doesn't really have, I think, the same societal effects as drugs like cocaine and heroin, and certainly some of these manufactured, the meth and all these things that just like absolutely kill people in short periods of time. So there's one other thing I wanted to ask you about. What's that?
They have absolutely no deaths from ODing on marijuana.
Exactly. Yeah, the other thing I wanted to ask you about, Rick, we had Lee Stranahan on last night, and he was talking to us about the Black Panthers and prison gangs that formed around the Black Panthers. And I know when you speak about prison reform, you're talking about we can't have these corporations making money the more people they put in there, because that creates an incentive-based system where they're bribing judges and they're bribing whoever to get people in there. We cannot have that, and I understand we want to reform that. I love the idea that you've introduced me to of making the prison actually a university where people who want to better themselves in there can do that. But what Lee was saying is that the actual phrase of criminal justice reform comes from the Black Panthers and from this notion that was originally put out there by Ho Chi Minh, saying that when you open the doors to the prisons, the real dragon will come out, and that the radical Marxists, people like the Weather Underground and the Black Panthers, they wanted to let everybody out of prison, murderers, rapists, etc., and just let them run wild so that we could have anarchy. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think that everybody should be out of prison. Some people should be in there. As long as it's done correctly and fairly, it's not done on race or economical background or religion. It's just done basically on the crime that you committed and on the evidence that they have before them. If it's done on those grounds, then it should be totally fair and legal.
Yeah. Well, Rick, I have to say, you're a really inspiring guy. I mean, I've only ever seen you on TV before and read about you in the newspaper. I had no idea the depth of your character and all the things that you've done to improve yourself and help other people. Is there anything else you want to say to the audience before we close out for today?
Well, no, just tell them follow me on Instagram at Freeway Rick, Facebook at Freeway Ricky Ross, and just keep an eye on me. Watch what I do. I've learned now that I can mold myself, that I don't have to allow my environment to mold me and make me what it wants me to be, that I can mold myself and make myself what I want to be. And that's what I'm doing now. And if you want to watch me do it, stay tuned. It's coming at you.
Yeah. You really are an inspiration, Rick. I have to say, I'm really pleased to have met you. And anyone who might be in Los Angeles or another state where cannabis is legal, you can check out Rick's cannabis products. The company is called LA Kingpins, and they've got CBD oils and all kinds of premium cannabis oil products. Charlie, anything you want to cover before we go?
No, you can follow me, follow my new podcast, Apple Podcasts or Spotify, Macro Aggressions with Charlie Robinson. I put the first 5 episodes up. We'll put a new one out there each week. Check it out. Please subscribe. It's free. Takes 2 seconds. Go ahead and do it. Support the show. And if you have questions, you want to contact me directly, you can reach me through my website, theoctopusofglobalcontrol.com.
Yeah, The Octopus of Global Control is a fantastic book, and I'm looking for where I have the website up here. There we go. People have seen Charlie on the show before. You can order the book from his website, The Octopus of Global Control. And I have to say, Charlie, the macro aggressions, it's a very funny name for the podcast. People who haven't had the opportunity to meet Charlie, if you want to sit down and have a meal with a guy with a great sense of humor, is just an all-around good guy, Charlie is your man. I want to thank Rick.
Likewise, Jason.
Thank you. I want to thank Rick for taking the time out of his day to speak with us. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Charlie, you as well. I hope to have you guys both back really soon. And I want to thank everybody for watching. Remember, if you watch and enjoy Crowdsource the Truth every day, I can't keep the show going without your support. Become a sponsor by going to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and you're going to get access to a huge and constantly growing library of sponsor-exclusive content. Plus, you're going to ensure that we can continue bringing you free content and excellent guests like Freeway Ricky Ross and Charlie Robinson. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Have a great night, and thanks everybody for watching.